The Lannister family proceeded down the corridors outside the royal apartments. Sansa and Joanna walked at young Tyler's pace as he held his father's hand. Tyler's hair was a dirty blonde, much like Tyrion's. His father would often be blinded by Joanna's golden locks. When in direct sunlight, it nearly glowed. Perhaps a result of pure Lannister blood, Tyrion thought. It felt odd to Tyrion to walk at a slower pace. As the High Lord, companions would walk at a slower pace, or as he desired. Tyrion rarely had to think of someone else's pace, until Joanna was born.
My lord hand?
The often-spoken phrase had distracted Tyrion from his own thoughts. Yes, Lady Yara, Tyrion responded.
May we speak on an urgent matter?
Yara requested, though her tone was more of a demand. Tyrion's eyes met Lady Sansa's. She seemed disappointed that Tyrion would miss another family dinner.
Needs of the realm.
Lady Sansa smiled. Sansa reached out to take young Tyler's hand and continued down their original path. The hand of the king and the master of ships paced through the courtyard. I would like to congratulate you on a fine presentation. You won over most members of the small council, Tyrion complimented.
It's a question of efficiency. Lords and ladies must be capable of operating their lands, without worrying about reprisal, through a voting process.
Yara responded as if she had the remarks prepared. True, though the common folk may surprise you, Tyrion responded, as he pulled open the exterior door to the common area of his apartments. But the vote is not why you want to speak with me, Tyrion assumed.
No, it's not. It concerns my nephew.
Yara responded. Ah, yes. How is the heir to the Iron Islands? Tyrion asked.
He's proving himself a Greyjoy. Vaelin has become quite capable at sea. He is sailing for King's Landing with a handful of longboats. He assumed appointment to the High Council, without approval from the commoners. Likely he believed in my argument.
Yara finished. I see. When is his estimated arrival? Tyrion asked as he poured the lady and himself a glass.
That's the reason for seeking you out, my lord. He had been at sea for weeks, sailing around the Arm of Dorne, when he came across an armada of pirates.
Yara informed him. Not likely any pirates alive would try their luck with a Greyjoy fleet at sea, Tyrion responded.
This is true. They were not attacked outright, but continued to plunder merchants in plain sight of our fleet, almost daring us to challenge them.
Yara explained. And did Captain Vaelin? Asked Tyrion.
Of course, Vaelin lost one ship, but destroyed 3 in return. Survivors were plucked from the sea.
Yara informed him. I see. And what awaits his captives? Tyrion asked.
His options are limited. Those no longer raising arms against him are spared a death sentence from any one person except the king, in accordance with the new laws.
Yara responded. Greyjoys, following the king's law to the letter, laughed Tyrion, attempting to feign shock. Yara was slightly assumed.
My father is dead, as are the old ways,
Yara assured the hand. She stared off into the distance, when speaking of her father. Tyrion maintained his silence as he refilled her cup. Tyrion observed her closely before interjecting in between her thoughts. He noticed how the sling that held her lifeless left arm had now been integrated into her blouse, rather than a crudely torn fabric she often wore years ago.
He has offloaded the captives in Sunspear, the closest major port. He is anchored there waiting the result of our conversation,
Yara claimed, snapping out of her trance. Results? Asked Tyrion, in a questioning tone.
It is very unlikely he can continue to sail directly to King's Landing without being accosted. He asks...
Yara then paused to clear her throat.
He requests to fly the King's banner and sail under the King's protection in defense of the crown.
Yara requested. This would allow him to give no quarter and execute prisoners with the King's authority, Tyrion responded.
It is likely the liberty given to rein in the brutality of the realm is likely the reason for these pirates' brazen actions.
Yara presented. True as that might be, I would leave that part out when in discussion with the king, laughed Tyrion. As well as in my wife's presence, he laughed. Tyrion was referring to the first major legislation approved by the king, and submitted by Lady Sansa, the Master of Laws.
I was hoping you would discuss this matter with the king directly. That way we could avoid any entanglements with your wife.
Yara explained. Of course, Tyrion responded. He knew her position was biased towards her nephew, and Sansa was not likely to appreciate being circumvented. Tyrion's agreement was to ensure the king's approval would best meet the needs of the realm, rather than any one particular house. 3 loud thuds at the door, and Arya Stark entered, wearing her modest Kingsguard armor. Welcome, Lord Commander. I'd offer you a glass. But am I to assume you're on duty? Asked Lord Tyrion.
Thank you, my lord hand. I am on duty. The king is here to see you,
Reported Lady Arya. Tyrion and Yara immediately rose to their feet. A soot-covered King Gendry bustled into the Hand's common room, as he was surprised to see Lady Yara. Your Grace, announced Tyrion and Yara in unison. Gendry was obviously surprised to see the Master of Ships present. Lady Yara, fine closing arguments for today's vote, complimented King Gendry.
You flatter me, your grace. I was assuming you would lean towards the rebuttal.
Yara responded. Perhaps your arguments were compelling nonetheless. Gendry smiled through the soot on his face. I was hoping to speak to Lord Tyrion, if you would, gestured the king. Lady Yara pleasantly excused herself as Arya shut the door and guarded it from the outside. I had hoped to catch you at dinner, exclaimed the king. The king doesn't seem dressed for dinner, laughed Tyrion as he handed the king a glass. Yes, well, it seems as of late, the only time I can think clearly is with a hammer in my hand, Gendry responded. I can imagine it's a better trait for a king to desire to construct a throne than to sit on one all day, Tyrion smiled. Am I to assume your thoughts dwell on the vote results? Tyrion asked. Gendry then returned his wineglass to the table and stood to his feet, his hands on his hips while exhaling loudly. The point of the High Council was to return some power to the people, not further empower those born into it, said a clearly frustrated Gendry. The establishment of the High Council will be the hallmark of your reign, your grace. Perhaps the most selfless act a monarch has ever done. Delegation is not normally a tool of the powerful, Tyrion reminded the king. Perhaps. Whether a decision comes from the king, a warden, or a liege lord, it matters not to people of my birth. They make no discernment between the three, Gendry retorted. The decision as to how the council is seated rests with you, your grace, Tyrion reminded him. The whole point was not to have a single man make decisions for the 7 kingdoms. Setting the council's decision aside would not be a prudent start, Gendry exclaimed. That may be true, but the decision to form the council was decided by a single man. The only question is how they would be seated. By decree or by the common folk, Tyrion put plainly. Gendry exhaled again, still refusing to retake his seat. The most vast of all the kingdoms, the North, took the preferences of all of its people, Gendry explained. That is true, your grace, but their liege lord also happens to be omniscient, Tyrion explained. Gendry had a confused look as he tilted his head back towards the hand. A mind reader, your grace. Forgive me. Tyrion bowed his head. Gendry then retook his seat with a chuckle. 15 years I've ruled, and I still don't understand half the words that spill out of you lords' mouths, Gendry laughed. Perhaps I could offer you a simpler solution to another problem. The Greyjoys are en route to the capital, and have sailed across issues near the Stepstones, Tyrion explained. Bloody history there, almost as much as the Riverlands, Gendry responded. To be sure, your grace, but this time I can offer you a solution, not just a problem, Tyrion informed. What solution do you propose? Asked Gendry. To allow the Greyjoys to do what they do best, Tyrion smiled.